The rain lashed against the windshield like tiny bullets as my sister's tires lost traction on the mountain curve. Her final text lit up my phone at 11:42 p.m. Caught him. Taking pictures now. We'll call soon. 20 minutes later, Highway Patrol found her car wrapped around a pine tree, her body still warm, rainwater mixing with blood on the crumpled metal. The photos in her camera showed a luxury cabin, a woman's silhouette in the window, and her husband's car parked where it shouldn't have been. I gripped those wet photographs while the coroner explained the angle of impact, how her neck had snapped instantly, how the storm created unfortunate road conditions, but I knew the truth. Elise died because she needed proof, because living with suspicion had hollowed her out over 18 months of marriage to a man who swore he'd never lie. At her funeral, he sobbed theatrically. Victor, the devastated widower, clutching her portrait to his chest while mourners patted his shoulder. I stood motionless across the room, remembering our last coffee date 7 days before her death. It has to be perfect, she'd whispered, stirring sugar into her cup. Not just catching him. What comes after? You could just leave, I'd suggested. Elise's eyes had narrowed. And let him build a new life on the rubble of mine? No. He chose this ending when he started lying. We'd mapped everything over weeks of late-night conversations. Elise understood people revealed themselves around her, mistaking her quietness for simplicity, her kindness for weakness. For months, she'd been collecting inconsistencies in his stories, noting how his achievements grew more impressive depending on who was listening. She had created a web of his fabrications that spanned his entire life. If anything happens to me, she'd said that final morning, her hand clutching mine, promise you'll finish what we started. I never thought I'd need to keep that promise. If you're hearing this story thinking it's just another tale of betrayal, you're missing what makes this different, what my sister saw coming, what I've spent months putting into place. If you've ever lost someone and felt that hollowness transform into something with sharp edges, hit subscribe. This isn't a story about grief. It's about what happens when everyone underestimates what a grieving woman can do. Drop a comment if you've ever watched someone get away with something terrible and wondered what true justice might look like. My name is Ava, and most people know me as the quiet one, the sensible sister, the one who always followed rules while Elise charmed everyone in the room. I worked analyzing behavioral patterns for insurance companies, finding connections between seemingly unrelated events. Victor knew this about me, yet somehow never considered me a threat. 3 days after we buried Elise, Victor showed up at my apartment carrying a box of her personal items. Thought you might want these, he mumbled, eyes red-rimmed. Too painful to have around. Inside the cardboard box, her birthstone necklace, childhood teddy bear, and graduation tassel. Items a grieving husband might naturally part with, but not her journals, or thumb drive, or the file folders she'd mentioned keeping in her nightstand. Where are her journals? I asked, my voice level despite the pounding in my chest. His expression flickered for just a second. Journals? She wrote every day, about everything, everyone. A complete fabrication, but his reaction told me everything I needed to know. Must have missed those, he said too quickly. I'll look again. I nodded, playing my role perfectly. The broken sister-in-law, too consumed by grief to be dangerous. When he left, I closed my door and placed Elise's teddy bear on my shelf. Inside its worn belly, accessible through a small seam repair I'd made years ago, was the real thumb drive Elise had mailed me 3 days before her death. Insurance, she'd called it. The start of our contingency plan. Victor thought her death would sweep everything away. He was wrong. Her death was just the beginning. The plan was never to catch Victor cheating. That was merely the trigger point. Elise had discovered something far worse during their short marriage. Victor wasn't just unfaithful. He'd constructed an entire life from carefully crafted lies, different versions of himself for different people. Different stories about his past, his education, his business dealings. He'd created inconsistent realities that only worked if the people who knew different versions never compared notes. He thinks he's so clever, Elise had said during our planning. But his entire life is balanced on toothpicks. One push and it all falls. While Victor buried himself in work and public sympathy after her funeral, I began my transformation. No one watches the grieving closely. They avert their eyes, uncomfortable with raw pain. This gave me freedom to move. I dyed my hair from blonde to chestnut brown, similar to Elise's shade. I started wearing her signature coral lipstick. Small changes that unsettled Victor whenever we crossed paths but weren't dramatic enough for others to question. You look different, he commented 3 weeks after her death, when I attended a business dinner as his deceased wife's representative. Grief changes people, I replied simply. What Victor didn't realize was that I'd been reconnecting with everyone in their shared past: college friends, former colleagues, family members. I asked innocent questions about memories of the couple for a memorial project. Each conversation planted seeds that would later bloom into questions. To his mother, I mentioned how proud Elise had been when Victor graduated from Lakewood University. Lakewood? His mother frowned. Victor attended Hillcrest. I have his graduation photos. To his business partner, I recalled how Victor always claimed he was entirely self-made, never taking a cent from anyone. That's odd, the partner said. He told me his uncle fronted his first investment. That's how we structured our partnership agreement. Each discrepancy created ripples. People began comparing notes on their own, puzzled by these contradictions. Meanwhile, I maintained the appearance of a woman drowning in grief, visiting Elise's favorite places, laying flowers at her grave weekly, posting old photos of us on social media with heartbreaking captions. 2 months after her death, I hosted a dinner for Elise's closest friends. Victor couldn't refuse to attend without seeming callous. I seated him between two women who'd heard completely different versions of how he and Elise had met. Remember how you told Elise you spotted her in that bakery and followed her for 3 blocks before getting the courage to speak? I asked innocently, passing him the wine. Wasn't it at the charity auction? One friend asked. You always said it was love at first bid. Actually, another chimed in, Elise told me you met through mutual friends at a concert. Victor's smile tightened. Elise loved telling different versions of our story, always the romantic. Strange, I said. She always told the bakery story the same way. The first cracks appeared in his carefully constructed image. People began questioning other inconsistencies. Former classmates couldn't recall him attending the prestigious schools he claimed. Business contacts noticed contract details that didn't match discussions. His current girlfriend discovered dates that overlapped with his marriage. Victor's response was to blame Elise. She must have misunderstood. She handled those negotiations incorrectly. She was confused about dates and times. She misrepresented him to others. It was exactly what we'd predicted. He would use her absence to make her the scapegoat for every contradiction. But blaming a beloved dead woman only made people look closer at him instead. 4 months after her death, his business partner called an emergency meeting. Investors were asking uncomfortable questions about the company's founding. Clients were comparing contracts. His finances were under review. That night, Victor pounded on my door, wild-eyed and reeking of whiskey. "What have you done?" he hissed, pushing past me into my living room. "I'm grieving my sister," I said calmly. "What have you done, Victor?" People are talking, comparing notes, questioning things that were settled years ago. Perhaps they're just remembering the truth. His eyes narrowed as he studied my face. "You look just like her now. You're trying to replace her." "No one could replace Elise," I said softly, "but someone needs to honor her memory. By destroying what she helped build, our company is falling apart." I tilted my head. The company built on lies? The marriage built on deception? Funny how fragile things are when they're not built on truth. Victor stepped closer, towering over me. "Tell everyone you made a mistake. That grief confused you. That Elise was unstable toward the end. Or what?" I held his gaze. The moment stretched between us. Finally, he backed away. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said. "You can't prove anything." As he stormed out, I smiled for the first time in months. Victor still didn't understand. I wasn't trying to prove anything at all. 2 nights later, I organized a 6-month memorial service for Elise. Not the traditional kind with prayers and candles, but a celebration of her life that Victor couldn't refuse to attend without raising eyebrows. I booked the garden terrace of Elise's favorite restaurant, where they'd held their engagement party. What Victor didn't realize was how meticulously I'd arranged the guest list and seating chart. I placed his childhood friend who knew about his first failed marriage beside his current business partner who believed Victor had never been married before Elise. I seated his college mentor who had loaned him startup money next to his father-in-law whom he'd convinced he was entirely self-made. His current girlfriend was just tables away from the woman he'd been seeing the night Elise died. "You've done a beautiful job," Victor whispered, his hand squeezing my shoulder too tightly as guests mingled. "Elise would be proud." "She'd be proud of many things happening now," I replied, slipping away before he could respond. Throughout the evening, I floated between groups, dropping small comments that connected different threads of Victor's life. Not accusations, just innocent reminiscences that sparked natural conversations. Oh, Victor always told Elise how growing up in that small coastal town shaped his values. Really? He told me he was raised in the city by his grandparents. By dessert, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations grew quieter, with glances darting toward Victor. He drank heavily, his shirt dampening with sweat despite the cool evening. Twice, I watched him intercept conversations, laughing too loudly while steering topics away from personal history. As guests departed, I overheard his business partner asking pointed questions about discrepancies in their company's origin story. Victor's girlfriend was speaking intently with his college roommate, her expression growing increasingly troubled. I didn't need to directly expose him. I simply created conditions where his contradicting realities could no longer exist separately. Each lie he told to cover previous falsehoods only deepened the trap. That night, watching him loosen his collar, while trying to reconcile conflicting stories about where company funds had originated, I finally approached him directly. "She knew exactly what you'd do," I said quietly, standing beside him at the bar. "That's why we planned everything before she died." "Planned what?" His face drained of color. "My sister always said your greatest weakness was thinking you were the smartest person in any room. She knew exactly who you'd blame when your lies were threatened, how you'd try to escape scrutiny. That's why she made sure I knew everyone who needed to compare notes." He grabbed my wrist, fingers digging into my skin. "What did she tell you?" "Everything," I whispered, even though Elise had only shown me the framework, the details I'd discovered on my own. And what she didn't tell me? Everyone else has been filling in quite nicely. 2 weeks after the memorial, Victor's life began collapsed visibly. His business partner announced a formal audit after identifying concerning patterns of misrepresentation. 3 clients suspended their contracts pending review. His girlfriend moved out after comparing timeframes with the woman from the cabin. I watched it all unfold from a careful distance, appearing to everyone as the grieving sister who rarely left her apartment. In reality, I was meticulously tracking each development, each new person who discovered another facet of Victor's lies. What nobody understood, not even Victor, was that I wasn't actively spreading information anymore. I'd simply connected enough people that the truth was uncovering itself, like a stone rolling downhill, gathering momentum with each rotation. 8 months after Elise died, Victor showed up at my door at midnight, unshaven and hollow-eyed. "Make it stop," he pleaded, pushing past me into the apartment. "Tell them all it was a misunderstanding." "Tell who what?" I asked, keeping my distance. "Everyone. The partners, the investors, my mother, they're all looking at me like I'm some kind of fraud." He paced my living room. "They're connecting things that have nothing to do with each other." "Aren't they related, though? All those different stories about your past, your education, your finances?" He stopped pacing. "It's not what you think. Sometimes in business, you need flexibility with the truth." I finished for him. "That's what you told Elise when she first suspected you were lying, that different situations required different versions of the story." His shoulders sagged. "Everyone does it." "No, Victor. Not everyone builds their entire existence on fabrications." He moved toward me, hands outstretched in supplication. "What do you want? Money? I can still salvage enough to make it worth your while." I laughed then, a sound so unexpected it startled us both. "You still don't understand. This isn't about money." "Then what? Revenge? You think this is what Elise would want? Me destroyed?" "This is exactly what Elise wanted." I stepped closer, close enough to smell the desperation on him. "She knew who you really were long before she died. She just needed to be sure." "Of what?" "That you would do exactly what you've done. Blame her when she wasn't here to defend herself. Use her death as an opportunity to reshape the narrative. Elise understood you better than anyone." For the first time, I saw real fear register in his eyes. Not the nervous anxiety of recent months, but genuine terror. "What else did she plan?" he whispered. I smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." After Victor stumbled from my apartment, I carefully locked the door behind him. On my dining table lay the battered teddy bear Elise had returned to me before her death. I gently opened the repaired seam in its belly and removed the thumb drive that had waited there for months. It wasn't time yet. We had calculated everything carefully. The timing, the sequence, the building pressure that would make the final revelation devastating. Victor needed to lose everything he valued before understanding what Elise had actually discovered. 10 months after the accident, Victor's professional life was in tatters. The audit had uncovered financial irregularities stretching back years. Former classmates confirmed he'd never attended the prestigious schools on his resume. Even his personal history unraveled as childhood friends contradicted stories he'd told about his upbringing. Yet he remained surprisingly buoyant. A new girlfriend appeared on his arm at events. He secured a position at a smaller firm through connections who hadn't yet heard the whispers. He'd lost his marriage, his company, and his reputation, but Victor was nothing if not adaptable. "He's rebuilding already," I told Elise at her graveside during my weekly visit, "just like you said he would." The October wind rustled through nearby trees, scattering red leaves across the cemetery. I placed fresh flowers beside her headstone and checked my watch. "It's time for the next phase," I whispered, "the part you were most certain about." That evening, I attended a financial industry dinner where Victor was desperately networking, trying to salvage connections. I wore a dress the exact shade of emerald green Elise had worn to their engagement party. When our eyes met across the room, he flinched visibly. Throughout dinner, I could feel his gaze returning to me, watching as I chatted easily with former colleagues and investors who had once backed his ventures, people who now avoided him but welcomed me, the grieving sister who somehow persevered with dignity despite tragic loss. As coffee was served, I finally approached his table, settling into an empty chair beside him. "You look well," I said, though he clearly didn't. New lines etched his face, and his once immaculate appearance had a hastily assembled quality. "What now?" he asked quietly, smile fixed for any watching eyes. "Haven't you done enough?" "I've barely done anything, Victor. That's what you still don't understand. Your world isn't collapsing because of what I'm doing." I stirred sugar into my coffee. "It's collapsing because of what you already did. I've simply connected people who needed to compare notes." "I've lost everything," he hissed through clenched teeth. "The company, my reputation, most of my money. What more do you want?" I placed my spoon carefully on the saucer. "Elise didn't die because of road conditions that night." His face went perfectly still. "What are you talking about? It was raining. The roads were slick." "She was an excellent driver, even in rain. Accidents happen." "Yes," I agreed. "And sometimes they're not accidents at all." The color drained from his face. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." I stood, brushing imaginary crumbs from my dress, and soon so will everyone else. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes burning into my back. The seed was planted. Now I just needed to wait for it to take root in his mind, the possibility that Elise had discovered something more damaging than affairs or lies about his past. Something worth killing for. The change in Victor was immediate and visceral. Within days, he stopped appearing at industry events. His new girlfriend posted cryptic messages about needing space. Former associates mentioned uncomfortable interactions where Victor seemed paranoid, asking strange questions about what people were saying about Elise's accident. I maintained a calm, collected presence in all the places he used to shine, at charity functions, industry gatherings, social events with mutual connections, always wearing something subtly reminiscent of Elise, her favorite perfume, her style of earrings, the way she tied her silk scarves. Small details most wouldn't notice, but that made Victor's eyes widen whenever our paths crossed. 12 months after her death, I hosted an anniversary memorial at Elise's favorite art gallery. I invited everyone who mattered in their shared world, colleagues, friends, family. Victor arrived late, hovering near the entrance, visibly uncertain whether attending was wise. I intercepted him with 2 champagne flutes, handing him one with a gentle smile. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said. "I almost didn't." His voice was rough, eyes constantly scanning the room. "People are saying things." "What kind of things?" "About Elise. About the accident." He took a large swallow of champagne. "About me." I tilted my head. "And what are they saying, exactly?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." His gaze locked onto mine. "What have you been telling them, Ava?" "Only what Elise would want me to share." His hand trembled, champagne sloshing over the rim of his glass. "Which is what?" "That she was looking into things before she died. Important things." I leaned closer, my voice dropping. "That she mailed me something the day before the accident." The blood drained from his face. "What did she mail you?" "You should mingle," I suggested, ignoring his question. "People are watching." Throughout the evening, I observed him from a distance. He moved awkwardly between conversations, flinching whenever Elise's name arose. Twice, I caught him in intense, whispered exchanges, once with his former business partner, once with a mutual friend who'd been at the funeral. Both conversations ended with the other person walking away, looking troubled. As the event wound down, Victor cornered me in the empty coat room. "Whatever game you're playing needs to stop," he hissed, gripping my arm. "You're implying things that could ruin me." "More than you've already ruined yourself?" I asked, gently removing his hand. "Interesting." I had nothing to do with her accident. I studied his face. I never said you did. You're making people think. I'm not making anyone think anything, Victor. That's your specialty. I smoothed my dress. Everyone loved Elise. They're simply honoring her memory by paying attention to things she thought were important. What things? His voice cracked. The truth, Victor. Elise was obsessed with it, especially toward the end. I left him standing there, shaking. The tremors of fear I'd planted had taken root. Now they would grow until he destroyed himself completely. 14 months after Elise's death, it happened. Victor showed up at my apartment at 3 in the morning, unshaven and wild-eyed, reeking of alcohol. Make it stop, he pleaded when I opened the door. Please, Ava, I can't take it anymore. Take what? I asked, though I knew. We had calculated this moment perfectly. People are watching me, asking questions about the night Elise died. He paced my small living room. The highway patrol called me yesterday, said they were reviewing case files. Someone suggested they take another look at the accident scene. I remained silent, watching him unravel exactly as Elise had predicted. I didn't do it, he insisted, voice rising. It was an accident. The road was wet. She was upset, probably driving too fast. Why was she upset, Victor? He stopped pacing. Because of me. Because of what she thought she saw. And what did she see? His eyes darted around the room, landing on the teddy bear sitting on my bookshelf. What's on that thumb drive, Ava? Just tell me what she gave you. Why don't I show you instead? I retrieved my laptop, inserted the thumb drive, and turned the screen toward him. Victor collapsed onto my couch, bracing himself for whatever damning evidence Elise had collected. Instead, the screen showed a simple text file, just 9 words. He will confess when he thinks someone is listening. Victor stared at the screen, confusion replacing fear. What is this? Where are the files? The evidence? I closed the laptop. There is no evidence, Victor. Not of what you're afraid of, anyway. I don't understand. Elise knew you better than anyone. She knew your patterns, your weaknesses. I sat across from him. She knew that if enough people started questioning you, you'd eventually unravel, that your own guilt would do more damage than any evidence ever could. Guilt about what? The affairs? The business dealings? About Elise's death. His eyes widened. But I didn't. Didn't what, Victor? I leaned forward. Didn't follow her that night? Didn't see her car on the mountain road? Didn't keep driving when you saw her go off the curve? The color drained from his face. How could you possibly know that? I didn't. Until now. The realization of what he'd just admitted crashed over him like a wave. He hadn't killed Elise, but he had seen the accident happen and left her there, continuing to his rendezvous rather than stopping to help. A fact no one could have known unless he revealed it himself. You tricked me, he whispered. No, Victor, Elise did. From beyond death, just as she planned. I stood and walked to my bookshelf, removing a small voice recorder I'd placed beneath the coffee table before he arrived. Modern, sleek, barely visible in the dim room. This was Elise's real insurance policy, I explained. Not evidence of affairs or business fraud. Those were just the pressure points to make you crumble. She knew your pattern. When cornered, you always try to explain yourself, and in explaining, you always reveal more than you intend. Victor lunged for the recorder, but I stepped back. It's too late, I said calmly. It's already backed up, and by morning the highway patrol will have their copy, leaving the scene of a fatal accident, not rendering aid. The legal term is depraved indifference. Quite serious, especially for someone already under scrutiny for other ethical lapses. You can't prove I was there, he said desperately. I don't need to. You just admitted it on tape, and your phone records will confirm your location that night. The rest is just details for the investigation. Victor collapsed back onto the couch, head in his hands. She couldn't have known, couldn't have planned this. Elise knew exactly who you were. She told me once that your greatest weakness was your certainty that you were smarter than everyone else. That when pressed, you'd always try to talk your way out rather than simply staying silent. I walked to the door and opened it. She was right. As Victor stumbled from my apartment for the last time, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what we'd accomplished. Elise hadn't planned her death, but she had planned for what might happen afterward. She understood that Victor's patterns of behavior would eventually be his undoing if the right pressure was applied. Her death became the catalyst that exposed every lie he'd ever told, not through elaborate schemes or hidden evidence, but through the simplest of weapons, human nature. People talk. Liars contradict themselves. Guilty consciences eventually crack. 2 weeks later, formal charges were filed against Victor for leaving the scene of a fatal accident. The business fraud investigations accelerated. His few remaining supporters disappeared overnight. No one stands beside a man who drives away from his dying wife. I visit Elise's grave every Sunday, regardless of weather. I bring fresh flowers and tell her about the latest developments, how Victor's world continues to collapse, how her plan worked exactly as she predicted. Sometimes I imagine I can hear her laugh, that knowing chuckle when someone underestimated her intelligence. He thought your death was the end of the story, I tell her. He never realized it was just the beginning. If you've stayed with me through this story, you know it's not really about revenge. It's about truth finding its way into the light. About how even death can't silence someone who understood exactly how to make justice inevitable. If this story touched something in you, hit subscribe for more tales of those who thought they could escape consequences. Leave a comment about what justice means to you. Because in the end, it's not about how we die, it's about what we set in motion while we're alive.